This is the Royal Report.
Good evening and welcome to the Royal Report. I'm Caroline DeRusso and here's what we've got for you on the show tonight. Now, Australia's new Governor-General is turning heads for all the wrong reasons, including in the UK. We'll let you know what our allies have to say about this controversial appointment. And surprise, surprise, the Sussexes are reportedly making Princess Catherine's cancer diagnosis all about them. We'll let you know what they're complaining about. And will Prince Harry's upcoming UK trip finally mend tensions with the royal family? Russell Myers joins us from London to give us the latest on that story. But first, it's been reported this week that King Charles is raring to go for his tour to Australia later this year. We understand his cancer treatment is going well and he's asked his aides to get plans in place ready for October. Now, we know from our interview with Peter Phillips a fortnight ago that the King is frustrated by his current health challenges and is eager to get on with his official engagements. Now, that bodes well for Australia given the extra effort it takes to get to the other side of the planet. That being said, the late Queen visited Australia 11 times between 1954 and 2011, so we know the royals don't mind a jaunt southward. Charles has also spent plenty of time in Australia in the past, but this will be his first and long-awaited trip as king. The King's two-week visit will also see him visit New Zealand and Samoa for the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. And it's been reported that the King is planning 6 to 7 engagements each day of his tour. But there will, of course, be plenty of downtime for the King and Queen so they can sustain themselves to carry out all those royal engagements. Now, everyone who watches this show is obviously excited about this visit, but query whether the enthusiasm is shared by our political class in Canberra. The current Prime Minister, an avowed Republican, has invited the King and Queen to Australia, to be sure, but one suspects more so out of good form rather than personal anticipation. Just last week, the same Prime Minister appointed a new Governor-General, Samantha Mostyn, who commences her appointment in July ahead of the King's visit in October. Now, Miss Mostyn is also a Republican and an activist. Relevantly, an activist who considers Australia Day to be Invasion Day. This is what best-selling author Douglas Murray had to say about the appointment on this network.
It's interesting that people like this new Governor-General, they actually don't feel bad about themselves. They love themselves. They absolutely adore the position they get to by telling everyone else in Australia that they must feel badly about themselves. If somebody comes along and tells you to feel guilt about something you didn't do, go and tell them where to go.
And fair enough. Imagine accepting a paid role to represent a king you consider to be from a line of invaders from a country you consider to be the problem. It is the absolute height of hypocrisy. And while Bill Hayden was a quiet Republican who converted after his stint as Governor-General, I don't hold hope that Ms Mostyn will do the same. I expect she'll be busily undermining the institution and the monarch she is supposedly charged with representing. Joining me now is News Corp columnist Louise Roberts, and joining us all the way from the UK, news.com.au, entertainment reporter Bronte Coy. Bronte, fabulous to have you back. Now, ladies, the Prime Minister has just announced our new Governor-General. Louise, how can you despise a constitutional monarchy yet accept a vice-regal appointment?
Well, yes, good evening, Caro. It is an interesting choice, I mean, to say that January 26 is Invasion Day and not Australia Day, and to throw your support behind a Republican movement. I think it's interesting that you then accept the role of Governor-General for Australia, where you're effectively the King's woman in Canberra. So whether she still holds these views and will be espousing those views will be interesting to see. I know some tweets and some social media to this end had been deleted, but I think we need to kind of judge her in the role, but that role, of course, abhors any Invasion Day sort of narrative or anything about making us not part of the monarchy anymore. So, look, it's a very, very divisive decision. I think some people are accusing her of being like a quota feminist in a way. Other people are saying she's very decent and experienced operator. So it remains to be seen how she will be doing the kids' bidding, of course, in Australia. And it'll be interesting to see what happens when he comes out to Australia himself.
And that's absolutely my next point, Bronte. Oh, look, I'm sure Miss Mosden will be on her best behaviour when the King visits, but is there anything that could potentially affect the royal visit in October?
No, and as you said at the top of the show, you know, the King is really planning full steam ahead with this tour as far as we know. He's really keen to come to Australia. But, I mean, all I keep thinking is it just could be a little bit awkward. I mean, look, we haven't had this referendum on the Republic, you know, and Anthony Albanese's made it clear that's not something that's going to be happening anytime soon, despite his stance on it. So, look, while this is the situation and that the King is the head of state, they'll just have to facilitate these tours, and this is what the situation is going to continue to be until that changes. And I don't know what it'll look like 5 years, 10 years from now. But all I do think is that it just could be very awkward at those official functions.
I think that might just be the case, to be honest. And Louise, we understand that Harry and Meghan, they found out about Princess Catherine's diagnosis along with the rest of us mere mortals. It's been reported they're a bit miffed about not receiving the news in advance. But honestly, how can they be surprised?
Well, exactly. I mean, the phrase, you make your bed, you lie, and it does spring into mind immediately, I think there, Caro. But the fact they even got a heads up, I find, you know, astonishingly generous of the royal family, given that they cannot be trusted with confidential information. And we know that they spread confidential information. In fact, they've monetised confidential information from the royal family, and they've done nothing to stop this narrative about Kate being a racist. So what does Kate owe them? Nothing. This is the most personal, critical health battle she's ever had to fight in her life. So why is she going to give them any leverage over? She won't at all. So the fact they even knew before, or roughly the same time as we did, that they should be very grateful for that, because they are the ones who removed themselves surgically from the royal family. They are the ones who betrayed them. So they can't expect to be in the inner circle when it suits them.
Now, Bronte, Meghan's new project, American Riviera Orchard, has launched, and her Instagram page has about 600,000 followers or so. Look, we understand she's been warned about the potential for some fake followers and how that could affect her credibility. What's the story here, and is there a real issue?
So this has been in the pipeline for some time. There's obviously going to be a whole lot of eyes on everything that Meghan does. And this is the awkward part about being someone who was a royal, where, you know, they need to be beyond reproach. They need to, it's the commercial aspect of it is a little bit awkward, because see now with this account, it's been pointed out that there's a significant amount of bots and fake accounts or suspicious accounts. Is about 14% of that 600,000. And that is something that everyone that runs a business online will be familiar with. It's a problem that people need to deal with when they're operating on the online space. But for Meghan, you know, she's been a very divisive figure. And as I said, everything that she does is going to garner a lot of attention. So she needs to make sure that she's really pushing that forward with authenticity. And the issue with having suspicious accounts attached to your business is that obviously it can get in the way of that. So this will be something she'll really have to watch. And that's what social media experts are pointing out. She'll need to make sure that, you know, that her brand engagement stays accurate and that she's really working towards her target audience.
It's still on PR, Louise, but a slightly different point. In the aftermath of Princess Catherine releasing her video announcing her diagnosis, there's been quite a lot of commentary around the royal PR strategy and its shortcomings. Look, the video was something quite different, but do you think it worked from a royal PR point of view?
I do, yes. I mean, mainly because it had such a mess to clear up. The strategy to be silent backfired spectacularly, didn't it, really? And it sort of allowed this information vacuum to develop, which then was filled with memes and terrible rumours about the princess herself, and then celebrities sort of crowbarring their way into the narrative to get publicity for themselves. So that sort of silence narrative was a disaster, I think. But having Kate in front of the camera talking about her cancer diagnosis, she then controlled the narrative, but also retained an element of privacy, because we have not been told what type of cancer she is in fact battling. So I think it was a win on that point of view, but what an awful mess they had to clean up. And also the whole fake photo scandal as well. I really felt she was thrown under a bus with that too, because obviously decisions were made about the PR on that, and whether or not she did doctor that photo, we will never know. But she took the rap for it. So I think the video and the transparency is a good step forward, but I still think there are some lingering doubts about trust.
And Bronte, more broadly, given the nature of social media and the 24-hour news cycle, is there a need and a scope for the royal family to tweak the way it engages with the public? You'd want to prevent this sort of thing happening again.
Oh, absolutely. That has to be the key takeaway of this whole saga. And can I just say, Louise, everything you just said is absolutely on the money. This, they went through their old traditional handbook, which was, keep it quiet, give out little bits of information and just hope for the best. But the truth is, that's not how it operates anymore. By delivering such a small amount of information, and then with the Photoshop blunder, which I still can't make sense of, that it seems it was such a strange strategy, and also to let Kate take the fall for that, given what the palace knew was going on. It's the old way that they did things simply isn't working anymore. It just created the vacuum that everyone was talking about Kate, and Kate and William have not actually been at the target of that kind of speculation before. It was a really tough time for them, and it heralded a new era. So I do think that they will be looking at that. I think they'll be looking to make that change moving forward because, it didn't work. What happened didn't work, and it became an absolute disaster, as Louise said.
Speaking of royals who have had it tough, Louise, we've seen Prince Andrew out and about quite a bit recently. There's some suggestion he's making a comeback. Is that likely or even possible?
Well, I would say unlikely. I think anyone who's pushing out the narrative of him making a comeback is probably his people per se. It's interesting to note that the events, or rather where he's been seen in public, have all been church services. So we had Christmas at Sandringham, we had King Constantine's memorial earlier in the year, and then of course we had the Easter service as well. These are not known as like official royal events. They're church events, they're private events. So he's entitled to go to those anyway. It's not as though he's scheduled to, be at the Trooping of the Colour or Remembrance Day, or in fact coming out to Australia ahead of Charles coming out here himself. God help us if he does. Andrew, that is, of course. But I don't see any sort of comeback on the cards because it only benefits him. I don't see how it would benefit the royal family at all. And I don't see the PR machine getting behind it either.
No, fair enough. And Bronte, just skipping away from the British royals to the Danish royals, you'll recall we covered the proclamation of King Frederick and the related scandal in detail at the time. It's been pretty quiet since, but there's some concern that not all is well. I've got just under a minute left. What's the story here?
Yeah, they're going to have a lot of scrutiny on them for a while to come, given all the rumours about their marriage at the end of last year, this Mary and Frederick. So they go away every Easter with their family. That's what they've been doing every year. And then there was some speculation because the people noticed that the royal flag remained raised over their home over the Easter weekend, which means that either Mary, Frederick or their son Christian was at home. So that would indicate, for people that are thinking there could be trouble in paradise, they're thinking, well, maybe Mary stayed back, particularly she attended an engagement on her own just a few days later. I think these two are going to have the spotlight on them for some time to come, for sure. But I will also say, look, it may have been Christian. He's 18. He might not have wanted to go on the family holiday.
Entirely possible. Louise Roberts, Bronte Coy, thank you so much for joining us. Now, coming up, Prince Harry's upcoming UK trip has sparked a range of questions and rumours. But what can we realistically expect to happen? Russell Myers joins us from London after the break. Welcome back to the show. Joining me now is Royal Editor for the Daily Mirror, Russell Myers. Russell, the BBC has come under fire for its reporting on Princess Catherine's health. They've had to come out and defend themselves. Can you tell us what's the story here, and is that criticism deserved?
Well, I can. Hi, Caro. I mean, this is quite a bizarre story because, if we remember the Princess of Wales' really heartbreaking and brave statement, I think nobody who had seen that could have failed to be moved by it. And yet there are people complaining to the BBC, saying that it was excessive, it was insensitively handled. Now, the way that this happened was the Princess of Wales and the team at Kensington Palace approached the BBC, said that the Princess of Wales wanted to make a very personal statement. I mean, it resulted in that video that we've all seen. Millions and millions of people all around the world have seen it. And yet there's been, but just over 100 people who have complained. And the BBC felt moved to make a statement saying that how they had followed their editorial guidelines, that they appreciated that it wouldn't have been for everybody, but they believed that it had been handled in a sensitive manner. And I think you're totally right, because it was a very important statement from the Princess of Wales. I was really moved by it. I thought when she was describing how her and William contemplated how they were going to tell their children that she had been diagnosed with cancer and was having chemotherapy treatment was absolutely heartbreaking. And I think it's really helped to die down the sort of swell of conspiracy theories we'd seen over the last few weeks that were not only outlandish, they were hurtful. And hopefully the Princess of Wales will get the time to rest and recuperate before she returns to royal duties, like she said. And, you know, the BBC should be applauded for handling that so sensitively, I think.
Now, there's been plenty of talk this week about Harry's upcoming visit to the UK. Now, no doubt there is tension that remains within the family. But is this a good opportunity for him and William to get in a room together?
Well, it might be. I mean, certainly we know about the fractiousness of the brothers' relationship. It's stretching back many years now. And certainly when Harry was back in the UK in recent weeks after the King was diagnosed with cancer, it was a whistle-stop tour. He was barely here just over 24 hours, and yet he didn't get to spend any time with his brother William or indeed any members of the extended family. And I think that really speaks to us about how Harry's place in the family is very much outside the camp at the moment, isn't it? And he, of course, wanted to see his father at the earliest opportunity. And now we've had, since then, the Princess of Wales divulging her cancer diagnosis. And yet, you know, is this an opportunity for Harry to come back? I mean, it's going to be the 10th anniversary of the Invictus Games, a fantastic event that he has absolutely put his life and soul into creating and to making the best platform possible to help injured servicemen and women around the world. And yet, you know, is this going to be the opportunity for him to sit down with his brother? I'm not too sure. I think that certainly the Prince and Princess of Wales have bigger things on their minds at the moment rather than sitting down with Prince Harry.
And as an interesting side point to all of this, a report this week that Harry may in fact regret what he wrote about Princess Catherine in his memoir Spare. You know, you'd think anyone of good sense wouldn't have said those things in the first place, but with her recent health challenges, it does make his criticisms of her seem all the more puerile, don't they?
Well, hindsight is a wonderful thing in certain quarters, and unfortunately, you know, the events of the last few weeks have happened well after Prince Harry put pen to paper and after the huge furore over his memoir Spare. I mean, an awful lot of things were said in that book that perhaps he has some regrets. I'm not sure. Perhaps Meghan and Harry do have some regrets about the way that they left the royal family. Perhaps there's some regrets on the side of the royals themselves. Perhaps they thought that they should have all come together. It all got very heated up in the moment, I think, and spilled out into the public sphere. If maybe they'd had an opportunity to sit down, thrash it out like the late Queen and King Charles, when he was Prince of Wales at the time, wanted, then perhaps it could have all been avoided. But as I say, hindsight is not going to do anyone any favours in this instance. And perhaps there just needs to be a little period of time where the royals can sort of digest the last few months of what's happened with the health scares and the things that have been going on with the family. Harry and Meghan need to try and find a more solid footing in order to sort of launch themselves into the private and corporate world that they so desperately wanted to be a part of. And you never know, perhaps it'll be the time when they come together in the future.
And Russell, Netflix has just released Scoop, a dramatic remake of the 2019 Emily Maitlis interview with Prince Andrew, casting Rufus Sewell as Andrew. Here's a snapshot.
I really don't understand why everyone's so obsessed with my friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. I knew Jimmy Savile so much better. Thank you very much. Very nice to meet you. Shall we pop up and say hello to Mummy before the Commonwealth banquet? Never ends, does it? Amanda will be in touch one way or another.
Russell, what do you make of Scoop and how accurate is it?
Well, I quite enjoy it. I've seen it twice now. I saw it on a screening a few weeks ago, and I've since watched it after its global release. And I've actually got a bit more into it. I think Rufus Sewell is absolutely fantastic in his portrayal of Prince Andrew. We all know the story, don't we? We've absolutely been fascinated for it over the last few years. And I think that this will be a blockbuster success for Netflix. There is so much interest in the Prince Andrew story, how on earth he would have not only put himself in the position of being friends with Jeffrey Epstein in that awful web of deceit and deception about how Prince Andrew even came to thinking that it would be a good idea to sit down with BBC Newsnight. And we obviously know the fallout and his eventual downfall that took place after that. But it's a very interesting watch. Some of the critics have panned it, some of them have loved it, but I do think that there'll be an awful lot of people interested in the story because of how disastrous it was for Prince Andrew at the time.
It was an absolute shocker to watch. It was one of the most cringeworthy things I think I have ever seen. Now, onto something else that's a little bit cringeworthy, and that's NIMBYs. Every country has its NIMBYs, and we understand the locals in Kent are not pleased with an affordable housing project proposed by the Duchy of Cornwall. What's the issue here, Russell?
Well, it is a big issue, and it revolves around the Duchy of Cornwall that, of course, the King, when he was Prince of Wales, had jurisdiction over. Now it is the responsibility of Prince William, and Prince William is pressing ahead with these housing building projects. We've known from the last few months that he's spoken about his desire to try and end homelessness in the UK. It's a very laudable project, and there are some historical projects that are being taken over as well. And one of these projects is a house building programme, 2,500 homes. They're apparently going to be the most sustainable ever. But the villagers in a little town called Faversham are not happy. They're saying that it goes against everything that their old villages stand for, that it will be bringing more traffic into the town. And I think, we're always going to have NIMBYs, aren't we? We're always going to have people who are trying to rock the apple cart of progress, and this definitely seems like one of those issues. But how the Prince William deals with it is going to be very interesting, because does he want to carry on these legacy projects of his father? Does he want to transform them to be even more sustainable? That will probably upset more of the villagers than he had intended. So watch this space for this one. I don't think we've heard the last of it.
Absolutely. Russell Myers, excellent insights as always. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Karen. My pleasure.
Now, before we go, good news for royal observers heading to the UK this European summer. For the first time in history, Balmoral Estate will be open to the public during the summer. Now, a ticket will cost you £100 or £150 with afternoon tea included. The gardens at Balmoral have also been updated this year, and the tour will see you guided around the interior of the castle. Watercolours from the King's collection will be on display, as well as outfits worn by the monarch, the late Queen and the Queen Mother. Tickets are limited to 40 a day, though, for every day between the 4th of July and the 1st of August. And if you're planning a visit as well to Buckingham Palace, visitors will now be invited to rooms previously hidden from the public, and you can enjoy the view from that famous balcony. Tickets for that guided tour are £75. And that's the show for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Up next is Newsnight. Good night, and we'll see you next week.